if your teeth grew like your hair? It just keeps growing?
No.
No, you don't want to have to sharpen your teeth down?
That sounds terrible.
Get your teeth cut?
No.
And then the new equivalent of, oh, she looks a little weird. Oh, she has bangs now. It'd be like, oh, she has fangs now.
Yeah. Oh, she went for novelty Halloween teeth.
I'd have fangs, I think, if I...
For October, yeah, I think so.
Maybe just all the time. Because if they're just growing all the time, I don't want them all just straight across.
Oh, I want mine like even straighter across.
Yeah, that's probably true. I wouldn't get the Nosferatu fangs, though. They'd be the new school, the canines.
Yeah, I think I just want my teeth like a little bit longer and more straight across.
You'd go longer tooth.
Just a little bit.
A little longer the tooth.
Sounds good.
Well, welcome everyone to a very spooky episode of I Love This, You Should Too.
Ooh.
My name is decapitating Indy Randhawa, and with me is my lovely co-host Samantha Randhawa.
Oh no.
I think that means something in Paymon's language.
Does it?
Probably.
Ooh.
Paimon? Paimon.
Pamon.
Come on, man. Well, we are going to be talking about the movie Hereditary today. We don't need a big preamble. It was my pick. I saw it once in theaters, and I hadn't seen it since. And I did remember thinking, this movie needs a second viewing. And it took me many years, but I've done it now. But Samantha, this was your first watching of Hereditary. What did you think?
It was good.
Classic Samantha answer.
I don't think I'm close to loving it. I enjoyed watching it. It was an interesting watch, but it wasn't high on my list, I think.
All right. Well, we are going to break it all down. If you haven't seen Hereditary, go watch it because we are going to spoil everything. This is more of an analysis show than it is review. So we're really going to get into it. But I was wondering, for this movie, does it need a quick explanation? Because
yeah, maybe.
I feel like many people are just like, well, I didn't get it. Or maybe they did get it and don't quite see how everything fits in. So how do you feel? How much do you think you got?
I think I got it.
Okay.
And I think it was like pretty straightforward. This is just another one of those films where I feel like it wasn't for me. I think it was for someone who's like really into film and loves that kind of thing. So I feel like if I got the like dollars, not the dollar store version, but like the more like Hollywood version of this, I'd be totally cool with it.
What would make it the more Hollywood version? Because, yeah, I get that there are lots of like little things to look at, and it's kind of Kubrick in that way. It's very meticulously planned. But I don't think this is something that's so out there. I think that this is a movie that's so rooted in just family relationships that it is for everyone in that sense. I feel like that is a much more easy way in to the horror genre than, oh, there's a big guy with an axe, because people would be like, well, I'm not interested in that. But people, anyone could be interested in mother-son dynamics.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of too slow for me. I feel like it needed to pick up the pace a bit. And I think that if it was, like I said, a little bit more like mainstream Hollywood kind of idea of like a horror movie.
Spooky at the beginning.
Yeah, and then like faster in between the like plot points. It just felt a little slow to me.
I actually really appreciate how it took its time because it sets itself up as a family drama. And it's those elements, because it doesn't really get spooky until the final act, halfway through. One big thing happens in the end of the first act. And we're spoiling it, so it's the decapitation.
Yeah.
And then it gets wild in the third act.
Yes.
But the first big horrific thing is just as at home in a drama as a horror. Maybe how they showed it is more horror movie. But I appreciated that for quite a bit of this movie, it's not a horror movie. And I appreciate how that gets buy-in to the characters. I I was going to say I don't like. I care about all of these characters. I care about where they're going, and I care about the plot and this family drama. Mm-hmm. And then, now there's possession and all sorts of wild stuff. And I was already bought in, so I find that an easier ride, an easier transition to be on board for the spooky stuff. But horror movies, I think, quite unfairly have different expectations upon them. Like, you can have a dramatic movie that has comedy in it, and people are like, that's amazing, I love it. But if you have something else that then has horror elements, people don't like that. The majority of people, at least. I clearly do.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I understand why you like it and why people like it and why it was such a high-grossing film and stuff. I just think that it lost me a bit in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And high grossing in regards to low budget horror movies.
Yeah.
Not high grossing in the world.
I was reading about it today on my lunch break, and it was more like A24's highest grossing film until I think Everything Everywhere All at Once came out.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I think it made less than $100 million, but I think it had a budget of less than $10 million. So that's very successful.
Yeah, it made almost $88 million, and it was $10 million to make. So
I'm glad you have all those numbers.
That's what I do. I have all the character names and all the numbers ready.
Perfect. So should we give a brief explanation of what happened in the movie? Because I feel like, although we're, 8 years too late, but a lot of people are looking for just, what happened?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you want to go, or shall I?
You're better at this than I am.
I think not summarize it, but explain what's happening behind the scenes, because so much of what happens in this movie we don't see on screen. Did you feel like there were any points that were confusing to you, that you're like, why did that person do this? Or is that person dead now? What's happening?
I was confused as to why Charlie took his sister to the party.
Peter.
Oh, Peter.
Charlie is the sister.
Oh, Charlie's the sister. Sorry. Yes, why Peter took Charlie to the party.
His mom made him.
I guess, but it just seems like an odd place to send your daughter.
Yes. Well, I think she wanted some time away from her and wanted the two of them to bond a bit. And she then feels very guilty about that later on.
Yeah, and then just, I don't know. I don't know if I can pick out any moments to answer your question. It was just...
Did the ending make sense?
Yes. But I had a lot of questions about, how did the body get up there? And,
Well, it floated.
I guess, yeah.
We saw it float.
Yeah.
And then the other body was taken up by, you know what, let's go through it.
Okay.
So before this movie starts, we hear about Annie is played by Toni Collette, and I think I'll be good at referring to everyone by their characters' names except for Toni Collette.
Because she's the name.
And Gabriel Byrne, but he's a smaller role in this. So her mother is in this cult, and they are trying to bring about the birth or the resurrection, I don't know, bringing out Paimon, this demon. And originally the grandmother tried to put it in her son, Toni Collette's brother, and he killed himself, saying that they're trying to put people in me.
Right.
And they said that was schizophrenia, but it was actually happening.
It was the cult, yes.
And then when Annie is pregnant with a son, because they need a male body for Paimon, she is estranged from her mother, so her mother cannot do it to her grandson, Peter. But there is some reconciliation after that, and the grandmother is there for the birth of Charlie, who they talk about as she wanted me to be a boy. She's even named Charlie. And the grandmother really latches onto her because she is putting Paimon into Charlie. Maybe this entire time, Charlie is Paimon, or has the demon in there.
Paimon-ness.
Yes. But that's not the body that Paimon wants to be in. Paimon wants to be a male body, and they need 3 heads to bring this about. So, and those 3 heads will be the grandma, then Charlie, and then Annie. And the cult members are carrying out all of these plans behind the scenes. They orchestrate everything from the consumption of nuts to digging up a corpse and putting it up in the birdhouse or treehouse. Mm-hmm. And Joan is in the cult and plants herself in the support group and then pretends to be a friend to Annie. She doesn't have a dead grandson. She's running the scam, and she tricks Annie into inviting, lack of a better word, Payman out. And then all hell breaks loose. Maybe Payman goes into Annie when she's floating around. I'm not entirely sure what happens there. And these cultists have been living in the house. They're all over the place. It leads to Peter jumping out of the window. Perhaps he dies there, or perhaps he's just in a weakened state, but that gives Payman the ability to go into Peter's body. So he goes in there. He's in the body he wanted, but Peter has the mind kind of Charlie, because that's where Payman was before. So he's making that clicking sound, and everyone is happy because Payman's back and he's a man.
Right.
And all of this, most of this, doesn't even happen on the screen. And then I think the other reading, or do you agree with that reading? That's basically how it goes?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
And then I guess the other big reading is you could say that, oh, this is all mental illness and there's no supernatural at all.
Like grief, and that's triggering things. And yeah, that's interesting to see it from both sides.
What should we talk about first? Should we go over those, I guess, hints or clues about this whole story that's happening behind the scenes kind of the movie? Or do you want to talk about the reading where this is all just mental illness?
Let's look at the hints and the clues.
There are so many, so feel free to jump in with the ones that you recall. One of the biggest things is that symbol, the Paimon symbol, which kind of looks like three heads almost.
Yeah.
It's on the grandma's necklace, it's on Annie's necklace, it's on Joan's mat. And there's that one shot when they are driving Peter and Charlie to the party. We follow with their car as it drives, but then the camera stops. It slams into the pole, foreshadowing what's about to happen. And that symbol is on the pole as well.
Yeah. I didn't notice it there, but I, like, thinking back about how many times we see it in the movie, I was like, I wonder if it was there. And that was, like, kind of set up.
Because I think that is somehow predestined as well. And predestination is another big theme in this we'll probably talk about. When we see a view from the treehouse, there is someone clearly watching Peter because you can see some breath coming out. So it's not just a camera from over there. So there's people in there. We hear that the grave has been desecrated, the grandmother's grave.
Yes. And I was like, something about that's going to be important.
Pretty much everything that there's like a little throwaway to, it comes back. And that one, the grave was desecrated, and we get to see pictures that it was, in fact, dug up. And then there's that time when Charlie goes out into the field and she sees a woman that she thinks maybe is her grandmother and fire around. Yeah. So they were doing a ritual there, because then when you see the body of the grandma upstairs, it's all charred. Right. So I don't know exactly what's happening.
I didn't see it as charred. I kind of thought it was just like decomposing.
Oh, maybe.
It's been a while since she died, and like bodies decompose pretty quickly when they're just exposed to open air.
That makes sense as well. I just assumed that the fire and that was
but no, the fire part does actually make sense, because we do see her kind of frolicking in the field, and she is on fire, sort of.
I don't know if there was any frolicking. You could just see the back of someone's head and then fire around them.
Oh, I thought she was walking into like the tree line, but
I don't think so.
I could be wrong.
And then in that scene, when Charlie goes back into the house, she starts going up the stairs, but the mom says, like, take off your socks because they're all dirty. And Stephen also tells people to take off their shoes constantly. But there are dirty footsteps throughout the house. Oh. That's the cult people, I assume. Yeah. Because I don't think there would be such a concentration on telling people to take off their shoes that wasn't meant to make you think of something.
Because it's like already a problem. Yeah.
Then there are lots of photographs in this movie, one of which is the grandmother feeding Charlie. And the importance of feeding her, it comes up a couple of times. But in this picture, there's some like green stuff in the bottle. Oh. Later on, when Annie drinks tea from Joan, There's some green stuff in it.
Oh.
And she takes it out of her mouth and she's like, what's this? Then when they go into the box that has all the payment stuff in it, there is a bottle of Dittany of Crete, which is an herb, and it supposedly makes people lose connection with their body and can get the ability to astral project, or if you leave your body, someone else can come in there.
Oh,
it's after that Annie
yeah.
gets possessed or whatever it is, but Charlie was getting it at a very young age. And then there's also in the tiny diorama, the grandmother is breastfeeding baby Charlie.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that.
It says satiny on stuff, but there's a bunch of words written, and I was like, oh, I'll look that up. I didn't look it up, but that's probably something cult related.
Yeah, probably.
The only one I know is it said Pandemonium, and Pandemonium was like the capital city of hell, because it's Pan, all daemon, all demons. So all the demons lived there.
Mm-hmm.
When Joan comes and visits Peter at school, she's yelling at him, I expel you. She's trying to get Peter out of the body to make room for Paimon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's right after this when he breaks his nose on the desk.
Yeah, which
that was
was
a horrific scene.
That was hard to watch. That was really rough. It was a rough moment.
And it's things like that make it relatable. Well, not the going into a trance and smashing your face. But when these things are happening to him at school, I think of like, oh man, you have to go back to school the next day.
Yeah.
That's going to be rough. So that's what I mean about appreciating how it wasn't all horror, that we get it set up through these other things, because it makes the horror elements more real world to me that way.
My one big question was always like, why didn't these people take any time off from their lives? Like, no one's using a dead grandma excuse in this family at all.
We also don't know how long it's been. He might have been out of school for quite some time.
But I feel
after
like
his sister dies, I think he's gone out for a while.
Is he?
I thought so.
Oh, I thought it was like he was back like the next day.
I thought it was longer because of the deadlines of the art show. I thought it was quite a while away, and then it gets closer and closer. So it feels like this movie takes place over
months.
A couple months?
Yeah, maybe I missed that, but I did.
It's hard to tell.
I was like, man, if there's ever a time to like take excess time off, it's when your grandma's just died and then your little sister dies.
And it's kind of your fault.
And everybody seems to be just like charging forward in like a really bad way, because none of them are doing well, it seems like. No. Well,
that goes into the whole mental illness reading, that they're just not taking the time to care.
Yeah.
Oh, but what I was saying is Joan says, I expel you, or whatever it is. And then I think it's right after that he has that, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like a seizure almost. Mm-hmm. But he puts his hand up, and his hand is in this symbol with the two fingers. Mm-hmm. The statue up in the treehouse has the same hand gesture.
Oh, so it's like a...
And there's another lady who is naked in one scene doing that hand gesture, and earlier on is talking to Charlie and doing that same sort of
doing that
thing.
hand gesture.
Then, this I might be looking in too much, but you know how he has a crush on the girl that sits in front of him?
Yes.
There's a shot of her Facebook page.
Uh-huh.
In her picture, she's doing the hand symbol.
Oh.
Also, her last name is Molpe. And Molpe, as we learned very recently, was the name of a siren. A siren being a demonic kind of bird-like in some tales, creature who will pull you away to your doom. Then she is the one who, at the party, pulls him away from Charlie, which then leads to Charlie's death.
Oh, like so maybe she's that distracting was him, and And
in the party, there's a shot of a girl chopping nuts. Which high school kids are chopping nuts at a party?
I did find that very strange.
Maybe there's more people in on this than we think.
And she seems to be doing it like furiously.
Yes.
Like it was not how a teenager would chop something at a party.
It's like she's never had to do this before. And she's like, all right, I'll chop some nuts up.
Yeah.
There is a flash of light that often is used to show you when Paimon is doing something
Moving
and
around.
leading people to places. One of the instances that I really liked was there's this flash of light and then Annie knocks over the paint. Do you remember when she knocks over paint?
Yes.
If you watch it carefully, she never touches the paint.
It just...
There's about like
Paimon's
6
just
inches
like...
between the paint and her hand.
Ooh, okay.
So it knocks over the paint, and then that makes her look at the phone number she had taken from Joan and then go call Joan.
I really liked Joan, and while we were watching it, I couldn't remember what I knew this actress from. She's Aunt Lydia in Handmaid's Tale, and she plays kind of a creepy, sinister character in that. And so this was like, it was a similar role, but I really enjoyed seeing her in another like similar role to her other role.
And it is really sinister when you have this character who's under the guise of like caring and empathizing, but in reality she's running a scam.
Yeah.
Right? She's tricking her. I think Joan never had a grandson.
No.
She's in the support group for just for this reason.
She's recruiting, yeah.
And you remember how the grandson had his favorite chalkboard, and that's what was close to him, and that's why they used that. When she meets Annie outside of the art store, remember they're getting art supplies?
Yeah.
You can look in the back of her car, and it's very apparent. She has a bunch of chalkboards in there, and it says in big text, chalkboard.
Oh.
She just bought those chalkboards. It's part of the scam, man.
That is a scam.
And then in the book that they find in the boxes, Paimon has 3 heads that he's holding. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be, of course,
It's going to come up.
the grandma,
Yeah.
Annie, and Charlie.
Yeah, and then as you see it more and more, you kind of see it everywhere. It's like in so many places.
And in those establishing shots of the house, later in the movie, we get kind of time jumps. Like people go to sleep and then we get an establishing shot of the house in daytime and then it flashes to nighttime. Mm-hmm. If you look carefully in the flash to nighttime, there's naked people standing on the tree line. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Oh, I didn't notice that. And I kind of glad I didn't.
And a lot of those people are either present in the funeral or the support group, or sometimes both. So there are a lot of hints of where this movie is going if you look out for them.
Spooky.
But then I guess you could say that this whole reading is about mental illness and generational trauma and how unresolved grief and familial issues can manifest themselves in destructive ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can definitely see a mental health reading on this like really easy, like without even digging or needing to like read up on it or anything. It was like very apparent how grief-stricken everybody is, and then just how this extra wave of grief when Charlie dies just really pushes them over the edge, and they're all reacting to the same thing but very, very differently. And it's really interesting to watch them all go through their own thing by themselves, but together.
And the intergenerational nature of the trauma works very well, because the name Hereditary works for both readings just as well. Because you could very easily read it that there's a lot of mental health issues in Annie's family, and it's hereditary, and now she's dealing with it. She's having a schizophrenic break or something like that. You could read it that Charlie's not possessed. She just has a developmental disability. You could read it that Peter is starting to go through his first schizophrenic break because cannabis use doesn't cause schizophrenia, but in people who will have schizophrenia, it brings it about earlier, usually at around this age.
And also in men, this is the age that it starts to come out.
Exactly.
You're younger, or you're well into your 30s. This is like kind of a different shift.
So for all of them, it makes perfect sense that this is just something that they are seeing, and in combination with the guilt and what they have seen, and they're also kind of playing off each other and feeding each other's paranoia, that it just keeps escalating into what happens. And the father, Steve, is largely unaffected. He's not seeing all of these things. He's not going crazy, and he is someone who's outside of their bloodline, so maybe doesn't have that predisposition. In fact, I think he's a psychologist.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he is. And I'm just like, why are you still in the house, dude? Like, take your son and run.
Well, he's trying.
Yeah.
That one scene where he's just in his car and just breaks down and cries for a little bit, that got me, because he's trying to do whatever he can, and he can't.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that people who deal with mental illness in their like significant others or in their household, that's probably a feeling that's pretty common, and it has happened to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a little bit about like narcissistic tendencies in parents and how that's so tricky for children, right? Because the grandmother almost didn't get what she wanted from her family, so she created this other family, the cult.
Yeah.
And then, because it's hereditary and that's the theme of the movie, she's now forcing this upon her children who don't want anything to do with this. Annie doesn't even know about it, but she is a part of it, and she's very unwilling, just like Charlie and like Peter. So I love that fourth or fifth play on Hereditary, like the obligations of your family.
Sometimes those obligations are communing with the devil.
Yeah. And then Toni Collette has it to a lesser extent, because she has these moments of narcissism where she's telling her child that, like, I didn't want you, and things like that, right? Where it's hard to see a mother say those things to her child, but you're like, I get it. You're also just a human, and also you were dealing with this from your mother, who clearly didn't want you either. And
yeah, it's crazy to like see how many generations it goes back as you're watching the movie. Yeah. And
I don't think there's a correct or incorrect reading of it. I think it's like, oh, why do you have to choose? They are both playing on the same theme. I know with horror movies, we have to be like, well, what was the answer? It's also another thing we don't have in comedies, right? We don't have to be like, well, what was the true part? What was just playing on the idea of a romantic comedy? It's like, I don't know, it's all the same.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the case here. Like, I do believe that this movie is about an actual demon, but I think all of the hereditary mental health issues and guilt and trauma and everything like that, it's purposely mashed together to make those horror elements more, not palatable, because it's almost more disturbing that way, but more understandable for people who maybe don't watch a lot of horror. Yeah. Or maybe it does the exact opposite, like you think.
Yeah, I don't know. I think also when there's a lot of ways to read a movie, I struggle a little bit because I end up thinking more about what I've just seen instead of continuing to watch the movie. Because if you've listened to the podcast a lot, you know that like I can only do one thing at a time, and thinking and watching a movie are not usually happening at the same time. So I think I may have like set myself up for failure a little bit by trying to like really analyze it while we were watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to stay up late afterwards and think about it then.
Is that what you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about free will?
Sure.
Does it exist?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know either. The end.
Whoa, man.
We figured it out.
Yeah.
I like the discussions of free will and how they use the miniature models as a kind of a stand-in for that conversation. Because the first shot is, I think, the tree house. And then the second one is into the model, but then it becomes reality.
Yeah, that was creepy.
And I think there are shots later on that use an exterior that's a miniature, not the full house. Or they're using a tilt shift lens to make the real house look miniature.
So the inside of the house, I was reading about this, it was built in a studio so that they could give it a more dollhouse-like appearance.
Oh, interesting.
And then I'm sure they filmed it in such a way that made it look kind of weird with the perspectives, instead of just using a pre-existing house.
Yeah, because there were certain times where it's like, how high is the ceiling in this room? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. Like the perspective got.
But it's like there is no ceiling because
it's
flat, one of those miniatures.
Yeah. But yeah, I was reading about that because I was like, the set was really interesting in how the like hallway sometimes seemed like it was like a mile long, and then sometimes it was super, super short. And it was just really interesting how they played with perspective.
And all of this serves as a really interesting symbol for control and manipulation, because of course we have that the cultists are manipulating things behind the scenes. The grandmother is kind of doing it from beyond the grave, and just the legacy in your family. It doesn't even have to be, demon worship, but whatever that is also dictates where you go. And that's kind of a controlling force too. Like if your whole family's doctors, you're going to feel the need to be a doctor as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The pressure of obligation.
So of course it works in the sense that in a dollhouse, everything is being controlled, though things in the house don't have any free will, kind of analogous to the family in this, thinking that they're in charge, but it's being done beyond their power. But I also kind of read it as Annie is someone who never had that control, and now she's she's building this because this is a world where she does have some control.
Yeah, I kind of read that like that too, where I took it as kind of a reading of like she's recreating pieces of her life where she didn't have control, and then making them so that she has control over like literally everything in these scenes. Because there's some about like her mom, and there's some she makes the scene of Charlie's head getting pulled off, and just you get the sense that she's making things to kind of work through some of her trauma.
I think that's another one where it's a duality, where she's both the creator and the captive one in this world and in her entire family's narrative. And like so many horror movies, when you get a classroom scene early on, pay attention to what they're saying, because it's always talks about what the movie's about. This happens a lot. I think it's been on at least 3 movies we've talked about. I can't remember which ones. But they're talking about Sophocles and how the character's fatal flaw was ignoring the signs. And it's about free will, if free will exists, or you being controlled by a higher power. And yeah, that's all just, I don't need to explain why that's applicable. That's what we've just been saying.
It just really is.
Well, I think we broke down the movie pretty good, but we can't just end the podcast there. Maybe just I'd like to talk about some things that I just liked.
Yeah.
Like, I liked that Charlie always eats chocolate when she's nervous. That doesn't mean anything. Well, it probably does. But
it probably does.
Do you remember when we first see Toni Collette as a possessed person, and she's like up in the corner of the room?
That was
when he goes downstairs?
Yeah.
Did you know, if you look really, 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 really carefully, she's up there in the bedroom before that?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, you did see it?
I did see that, yeah.
It's this time I knew to look for it. And you can still barely see anything. It's so dark.
Yeah, those scenes where he's sleeping and he's just smashed his face up, and he kind of comes to and he's like alone in the house, basically. I think I liked how creepy everything was. And I think that's probably like the perspective and how they built the set and everything. But I really liked how the house kind of comes alive and feels like a dollhouse where someone's controlling everything. Maybe it's the devil. Paimon?
Yeah, he's one of 8, right? Have you read, oh man, what's it called? The Lesser Key of Solomon?
Oh, no, I haven't.
You don't read grimoires?
No.
It's like, that's like the pop grimoire.
Oh.
That's the Taylor Swift of grimoires. Everyone knows that one.
Everyone knows that one?
Yeah, that's the most accessible one. It's very, yeah.
Interesting.
Paimon's in there.
I didn't know that.
Again, I do have to say, I'm not scared of cult people or Paimon worshippers. I am scared of Taylor Swift people, and I'm not going to say that's a cult. I did not say it. They didn't say anything bad about her. I'm just saying she is very popular, and that is a fact. There's so much decapitation in this movie. There's like those 3 we talk about, but then there's also the bird. And when Annie goes and destroys all of her sets, her miniatures, the 2 she doesn't, one is of her grandmother breastfeeding her child.
Yeah.
And one is of a headless Peter. And Peter's never gets decapitated, but in her mind...
Foreshadowing.
But it's not.
No, but doesn't. Like she kind of hopes it's foreshadowing?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I guess decapitation is specific. right?
Yeah.
And you have to look at it then like, well, why isn't it any other sort of ritualistic murder? Why is it decapitation? And maybe that gets into these themes of the loss of self when you are just doing what your family tells you to do, or when you are completely consumed by grief or trauma, that's your identity, right? You can't tell one person from another at that point. Oh, and she cuts the head off that bird and then puts it on a toy of hers. And then when we get to see the statue up in the treehouse, is the bird, right? Because there is the statue and her decapitated head is up on there instead.
Yeah, that was spooky when you go into the treehouse and you see all the people and they're all decapitated, right?
There's two. There is the grandma and Annie.
Okay.
But all the people standing there are just people. They're just naked, creepy people.
They are very creepy. Yeah.
And another fun thing is those two dead bodies move. They don't move on screen, but from one shot to another, they have changed directions because they were kneeling before the statue first. And then once Peter comes up there, they have now turned and they're kneeling towards him. He's the new one.
He's the new guy.
It's also really similar to how Toni Collette, when she first finds Charlie, there's that shot of her just bawling, sobbing on the ground. And she's in the same pose as that too. I don't know if that's anything. It's just a thing.
Interesting. I know she wasn't in the whole movie, but I really liked Millie Shapiro, who played Charlie.
Yeah.
She I don't want to say that she looks creepy looking, but she definitely...
She's unnerving. It's a very unnerving presence.
Yes. And and it's like she's got an actual medical condition. But I thought that she was really perfect for this role because it was just it was unnerving from the beginning for sure.
I think this is one of those roles that people who haven't acted go yeah, anyone can do that. And then people who act are no, that was a good performance.
Yeah. And she won a Tony for her performance of Matilda in Matilda the musical.
Oh, is she Matilda?
Yeah, she's that's where she was kind of discovered doing that. And then the director cast her, or the casting agent, whoever.
They're hey, you're a great singer and dancer. How about we put you in a movie where you don't talk at all?
You don't do anything and all you do is click. But yeah, I was reading up on her because I was interested in her whole look. And she has cleidocraniodystosis, which is underdevelopment or lack of bones throughout your body, but most of the time it's in your face. So you can have no jawbone or missing a bunch of teeth, which makes your face shape strange. People don't have clavicles, so their arms just go anywhere.
Oh, wild.
It's quite interesting actually.
Huh. Well, if we're talking performances, how did Toni Collette not get nominated for an Oscar?
Actually, yeah.
And I know there's been a few things I've phrased in this of well, why is horror the exception? That's one that if it's a good performance, it's a good performance. And I think people feel well, horror's cheap and manipulative. And I don't think that's the case with this movie. And it's definitely not the case with that performance.
Oh, she was fantastic. And I think people kind of group horror as cheap slasher films. You're just blood and gore and it's over in 90 minutes and you're well, that was entertaining, I guess. It wasn't anything with substance, whereas this had a lot of substance behind it. And I think it was really interesting that it wasn't considered more of a drama piece.
Well, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Similarly, comedies, if you're the lead in a comedy, you're probably not going to get a nomination either. But this is just a fantastic performance. The nuance in it, how often you can see her say something and then regret it in that second with just a big brief flash of her eyes of a recognition of something she said that she shouldn't have said. The nuance in this performance and how to be that nuanced, but then still be as big as it is. And it's just over the top with grief and sorrow at times, but then there's still nuance in that. And it's fantastic. Even if you're not someone who's this is the best movie ever, it should win every award. That performance absolutely should.
Oh, for sure. And I think that awards should be based more on like how hard you have to work in that too. And this was a very physical role. It looked like it really possessed her like as a whole. So yeah, I think that like she should have won an award.
Usually, this is the type of performance that is bait for Oscars.
Yeah.
It's a grieving mother. That's absolutely it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if there was no demon in this movie, I think she would have won an Oscar.
Interesting. Because yeah, it would just be a commentary on mental health then, as opposed to a spooky demon movie.
Like you were saying before, how everyone reacts differently, and we get to see those different takes on grief. I really appreciated when Peter goes home in shock, in a haze, and his kind of method is avoidance, right?
Yeah.
And when he comes home and he just like can't go into the house, things like that. One thing that I found just heartbreaking was there's that one time when he's smoking with his friends after she has died, and he has essentially a panic attack, I'm guessing, right? And what he says to his friend is like, just hold my hand.
Yeah.
And he's crying and crying because he's not getting that from his parents.
Yeah.
I think his father would, but there's issues there too.
Yeah.
But he's not getting it from his mom, who he really wants it from. And it was just heartbreaking to see this like 16-year-old boy smoking weed with his buddies under the bleachers, just crying and asking for someone to hold his hand because nobody will.
Yeah. I'm glad that his friends were there for him, though. That made me happy. Because I feel like in a lot of movies, they'd be like, oh, well, teenage boys aren't going to touch each other.
Well, we also don't really see what happens.
No. But it does look like he's like moving in to comfort him.
With the accident, with the decapitation, I did appreciate how they did that. Like there was the lead up where you get to see the camera slam into the post with the symbol on it before they get to the party. But when they have the accident, they don't actually show anything at the time, right? Yeah. You know what happened. And when Peter is sitting there in the car, his brake lights kind of flood over his face. Like this red comes into the screen and starts reflecting off everything like the blood would be. So we know it's there. It's giving you the hint of what's happening without actually showing it. And then you get to hear Toni Collette react off camera first. And you're like, okay, we're getting spared from seeing her reaction. We got spared from seeing the decapitation. Now we're getting spared from this. But no, you then see her inside sobbing on the ground, and you're not spared any of that grief. You have to sit and live with it. And you get the smash cut to the decapitated head of Charlie covered in ants. And it delays both of those things so far that you let your guard down. You're like, okay, I didn't have to see it, and then here it is.
And then there it is, yeah.
It's like you want to get away from the grief aspect. And the horror movies are a big part of that, right? They show horrific things happening, but you don't see the fallout. And here it's all about the fallout. The horrific things happening are just a catalyst to the grief. And the movie is much more concerned with the grief and resolution or lack thereof than the traumatic event itself.
Whoa. I agree.
Some tiny little things when Peter is in bed looking out the window and the treehouse is out there with the red light, and he knows that his mother is in there, and he knows that he's responsible for causing her grief, and we just see the reflection of red in his eyes.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's just some good filmmaking. I really liked that.
I love Indy's film school.
I loved their kind of screaming match at dinner.
Yeah.
It felt so real.
Yeah. Like you were sitting at a table and your friend's family was kind of going at it.
Because she says things like, I know it wasn't your fault, but she's shaking her head no during all of that because she doesn't believe it.
She doesn't believe it. She's just saying it to make him feel better.
She's saying it because she should say it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what she believes. And it doesn't even matter. She's like, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It has happened.
Yeah.
And then when he says, for his own self-preservation, like, well, you made her come. And that's, he's doing that for his own benefit.
Yeah.
But that whole scene is really hard. And she says, was it there or is it another scene where she says, I never wanted to be your mother? That was really hard too.
Yeah.
That gets into those narcissistic things. Oh, in my notes I have Gabriel Byrne's. Gabriel Byrne is the name of the actor, but then he gets set on fire.
Right.
Gabriel Byrne's.
I see what they did.
When she's smashing her head on the attic door.
There's so many moments where I'm like, wow, they really like went for it and showed everything.
Yeah, and I think I appreciate that about this movie. And to me, it is the complete antithesis of like Hostel, which is all about, they call it torture porn, right? It's like, oh, look how graphic this is. Oh, can you stand to watch this? That does it in the cheapest way possible. And this does it in whatever the opposite of that is. The most roundabout and I don't want to say visceral because that makes me think of like those actual stabbing torture movies.
Yeah.
This is like in your soul. You feel the sadness of this movie.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it is done in a very brutal but like less gratuitous sort of way.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. Brutal but not gratuitous.
Because I feel like I haven't seen Hostel.
The first one's actually a fine movie.
Is it?
Yeah.
But I do remember seeing like Saw and like those movies, and it very much is. Sorry to interrupt you, but I meant to say Saw. Oh, the first Saw is good. I have seen some Hostels. I don't know how many there are, but I didn't enjoy it. But the first Saw is good. The rest, not so much. I only saw a couple. I saw one, and I think I saw it at like a party, so I didn't have to watch the whole thing. But I definitely didn't enjoy it, and it felt gory just for the sake of being gory.
It's meant to unnerve you, to disturb you. And this is as well, but rather than like, well, what if you were chained up and you had to cut off your foot?
Yeah.
Which is disturbing. This is what we keep talking about this year of like, what's the actual scariest thing? It's the death of your loved ones.
Yeah.
It's showing you like, here is the scariest thing in the world. Watch this mother deal with it.
Yeah. And slipping away into mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a thinker.
What about the treehouse? Have any treehouse thoughts?
I thought it was cool how the foreshadowing kind of happened with the heater being with the red light, because like you were saying, like the red light is kind of everywhere, and I thought that was kind of a nice way to make it creepy before you know why it's creepy.
It's a reason for it to be glowing red. Because they're like, why is that glowing red?
Yeah.
Like, there's a heater in there. That actually makes sense.
And then you're like, it just like looks kind of creepy. And then you're like, oh no, it is super creepy because that's where a cult lives. And you're like, oh, there's some like creepy stuff happening in there.
I'm still not sure how to read the treehouse. Because at first I thought there's something to do with a birdhouse, because it looks kind of like a birdhouse. Birds are big in this, and I think Paimon also has a bird form. That might be a thing. Charlie kind of clucks bird-like as well.
Yeah, she does.
There's a lot of bird things going on in this movie. What they all mean, I'm not entirely sure. I thought it was a thing related to Paimon, but perhaps not. But the treehouse also is kind of like a symbol of childhood innocence. Right? It's make-believe in the treehouse. You're playing in there. And there's also some isolation to it because it's up in the trees. It's away from the house. So I thought maybe that this was like a refuge for Charlie, a childlike place that she could be in that was away from everything else. But then the cult is in there. So maybe it is that, but it's showing you that there is no refuge to that which is hereditary, whether it is grief, trauma, demons, whatever, literal or figurative, that you can't get away from it because her idyllic childlike place is the most corrupted, and in fact is where the family has its darkest moments. I don't know. That's something, I think.
It definitely seems like something. And yeah, I found it very creepy right from the beginning, even once we have the explanation of what the red light is. And I don't think that the red light is enough to make it not creepy. And the fact that you can see it from like almost every window in the house made it seem very like strange and like otherworldly.
When Peter falls out of the window, at first I thought there's like a shadow that goes. Did you see the shadow?
Yeah, like a soul.
So that's what I thought at first. But I think because it comes from away from him and then goes over him and continues on.
Right.
I think that was the decapitated body of Annie floating out the window, and it's a literal shadow of her.
Right. And then you do see her going, like, floating up into the treehouse at the same time.
And she would have come out of that window, the same window, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that was.
I kind of thought it was Paimon?
Well, then a light goes into Peter. I think that's Paimon. Because he's been a light throughout.
Right. Yeah. Paimon. I don't think I have anything else.
Oh, what about the scene of her flossing her neck right off?
Oh, yeah, that was gross.
That was gross.
There's another one where I'm like, a little gratuitous, but it kind of set the scene of how horrific this movie is.
If I were to change anything in the movie, I would have made her do it slowly.
Yeah.
That's a small change, but I think that would have been more effective to me. And earlier, you hear the piano wire being pulled out. Mm-hmm. But you just think like, oh, it's a scary noise. All of the scary noises are things that then come up later on.
Yeah.
And how often when you're upstairs in the attic, at first there's like a fake out of a headless mannequin. And you're like, mannequin. Oh, no, it's fine. And then in the next scene, when Peter's there and there's like a naked person standing behind him, like, I don't even know if people notice. You have to like really look for it. But you already kind of dismiss it as, it's a mannequin. We saw it there before. But now there is an actual person there.
And it's actually, someone to be scared of.
And then it rounds out very fittingly with the end credits where one letter from each name then goes into the next one.
Oh, yeah.
Having that kind of hereditary chain of whatever you have.
I've got.
Whether it's grief, trauma, or an obligation to bring demons into this world, it's getting passed on to the next generation, whether they like it or not.
Whoa. I thought the credits looked good.
They did. Well, that rounds up our Spooktober for this year.
Yeah. I hope everybody's having a spooky time, getting spooky in your day-to-day life. And I guess Halloween is next week, so woo.
Exactly. And like I like to say every Halloween, it's great to be spooky this month, but the important part is to keep that spookiness in your heart all year long.
Yep.
So next week, we are not bringing out a new episode, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring back a 4-year-old episode, and I thought a good companion piece to this, demons, possible mental illness, family obligation. Let's bring back our Exorcist episode.
Oh, yeah.
That was a good one. It was very long ago, so I think a lot of our newer listeners, all 4 of you, probably haven't heard that one.
Okay, well, we will not see you next week, but we will.
You'll see us.
You'll see us next
Hear
week
us.
Talking about The Exorcist. And we'll see you the week after when we talk about what happens in November.
Yep, we talk all about it.
Pre-Christmas.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Woo!